From cries of fake news to maligning the mainstream media, a look at why trust in journalism is so low and what can be done to restore it. Plus, how our unusual present circumstances will shape our future habits. Ford's chief futurist shares her predictions. Today is Sunday, December 27, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I hope your Christmas was wonderful. And now we make the turn to the new year. Most everyone I know is eager to smack 2020 on the rump and send it on its way. Maybe sock it in the nose, a better way to put it. I fear 2021 might not realize it's supposed to be a new start, but here's hoping we can convince it of that. What will the new year bring us? 2020 was such a wild turn from where we thought we were headed. But how much of it was just a detour and how much of it was a complete change of destination? Ahead this morning, we're going to talk with someone whose career is all about peering into the future and figuring out what the trends are and how they manifest themselves in our behaviors and our priorities. Cheryl Conley is the chief futurist for Ford Motor Company, and we'll pour over her new findings a little later on. But up first, the next round of what has become a continuing conversation on Flashpoint. The new year brings us a very big change in Washington, but the election, and for that matter, the last several years, have left us with a very divided America, and those Americas are increasingly relying on their own channels of information. Can American journalism use this transition to regain its footing, or is the role of a traditionally neutral journalist gone for good? We'll set up a checkpoint for reporters and editors this morning. Is there any way for the press to reclaim the high ground, or is it possible that we already have it, no matter what the detractors say? We'll walk our way into 2021. Up first today on Flashpoint. Well, we've done quite a bit of soul searching for the American press on this program over the years, and in particular over the last 4. And now with the calendar turning to a new year in a matter of about 3 weeks, a new administration taking over, I think a good time to talk about this component of American society that our founding fathers understood to be a critical part of a functioning democracy, but one that many Americans feel has let them down. Let's talk about the fix for that with Chastity Pratt, who is the Education Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal, Nancy Kaffer, columnist for the Detroit Free Press, Gary Miles is with us, the editor and publisher of the Detroit News, and on the upper left there, Guy Gordon, who hosts the Guy Gordon Show on WJR, but my former colleague here at Local 4 and a guy that Guy and I have talked a ton over the years about journalism. And so, Guy, let me talk to you first. Having left a sort of mainstream television, if you will, and gone to a radio station where a lot of your listeners are conservative voters. I'm really curious as to whether you think we've got a chance to get those folks back to traditional journalism, or after the last 4 years, have we lost them forever?
Well, first of all, we should point out that just because we're having this conversation is a good thing. It means we're not in denial about the fact that we need to be a little bit more self-aware and reflective of where we are at this moment, as you pointed out, Devin. I got to tell you, I mean, when I started in 2017, coming in with a reputation, I think, for fairness, it wasn't exactly appreciated. I mean, 8 in 10 people right now feel that the media is biased and that it's getting worse, and that when we hold public officials accountable, we don't do it in an even-handed manner, and that even our inaccuracies are intentional. That, too, is 8 in 10, according to a new Knight Foundation survey. So it's real. It's pervasive. And now you see, and you and I have been talking about this, the defection of Fox viewers to OAN and Newsmax because they feel that Fox is no longer pro-Trump enough. And we're seeing that on the progressive side, too, the abandonment of what they thought were their media sources. So we're not only putting ourselves in silos, the silos are getting smaller, and in some cases, we're seeking misinformation, not just what we consider to be friendlier information.
You know, Chastity, the rise of those two stations that Guy just mentioned, Newsmax and OAN, I find deeply depressing. And they often trade in conspiracy theory and a lot of dishonesty, I feel. I think many journalists feel that way. And I guess the question becomes, do I need to try to get those people back? Should I be reaching out to them, or is that just how it's going to be and that's kind of a lost cause? What do you think, Chastity?
What I think, Devin, is that, Guy is right. It's really important that we reflect on what we're doing and whether we're doing it right. Our job as journalists is accuracy and fairness. And I think that we're at a space right now where we shouldn't only reflect on what we do and how we do it, but we need to educate people about what the media really is. Because let's be honest, the fact that you have all these new news organizations calling themselves news organizations when they're really just peddling propaganda, people don't know the difference. So it's up to us to consistently and constantly do media literacy to help people understand there are journalists like ourselves who do the news, and then there are those who just spout off their opinions and conspiracy theories, and they should not ever, ever, ever be put in the same category as us, traditional media news organizations. So I think that's the real key here. We're going to see these groups come and go, these different news organizations, bloggers, personalities, what have you. People need media literacy to know the difference between news and propaganda. Yeah. And from there, we can address all the other issues, the conspiracy theories, whatever. People just need to get straight on what's news.
Gary, do you find yourself wanting the paper to adjust and to change with the kinds of things that Chastity's just talking about? Or do we, those of us who still expect that journalism can remain kind of a neutral force, and I'm not talking about your editorial page, obviously, which has a voice, but do we just have to kind of stay the course and say, no, this is what we do. This is who we are and who we've always been, and we got to keep doing what we do?
Well, certainly, I think the prudent course for the impartial media, as I like to think of us, is to stay the course, to stay impartial, recognizing that there will be a rise in partisan and, as Chastity put it, outlets that will seek to kind of purvey a point of view, and we've seen that already. And going also to Chastity's point, I think we see that that this definition of media is so loose that I don't even like us to use it anymore. I mean, what are we talking about when we say the media? Some of the people who will criticize the media will be talking about OAN or Newsmax, even though you or I wouldn't put them in the traditional media. So when you include everybody who has a public voice, then there's going to be distrust. I mean, it was just a couple of months ago that Tucker Carlson's attorneys were arguing in defense of a libel suit that he should not, that in no way do his readers expect him to be telling the truth. Yeah. He's giving a point of view. Yeah. And, that's what, going to literacy, I think that's an important point, as well as this watering down of the definition of media. So absolutely, I think for the impartial media, we're trusted voices. And I think what's often lost in this debate is that readership in traditional media has been growing. So yes, there are other outlets that are sprouting too. But readership in the Detroit News has seen incredible growth over the last 2 years, in part, I'm sure, because we are an impartial and source that seeks to tell the truth.
It's so funny, Nancy, I hate to feel so stodgy when people ask me about where should I be getting my news. I tend to, send them to the old reliables. That's not to say that there's not a lot of good journalism being done in new places. But I'm really confused about how we all move forward if we still believe in, and I've always told people that my job, for instance, on this program is to be an energetic Switzerland. If I still believe in the idea of a neutral journalist, I am under assault from a lot of different places, of course, but what I really don't know how to do is how to be a journalist in a post-truth world, Nancy, if the truth really is so now up for debate, and we have people talking about, as Kellyanne Conway famously said, alternative facts. I don't really know how to exist in that world.
I think that this last 4 years, and especially this election cycle, is a situation that none of our years in journalism have prepared us for. When you have people who lie all the time, people who are saying untruths that all of our outlets have debunked repeatedly about the election and what happened. And when people just don't want to hear that, what do you do? I mean, if I knew, I would be doing it. I will also say that, I'm an opinion writer, but I tell the truth. I don't think that having writing an opinion column means I get to lie. I tell you my angle or my slant or my interpretation or analysis of the truth, but I don't lie in my columns. And I think that's one of the distinctions that Chastity was talking about with the propaganda versus traditional media. I think people still really want reliable information. Early in the pandemic, and I never checked back in on this, but we saw people search traffic for information about coronavirus, starting off as COVID-19, coronavirus, pandemic, all this stuff. But then we saw a rise in search traffic for COVID-19 FREEP, specifically people looking to the free press for information. And Gary, you guys probably saw the same thing at the news, because they, I think what that meant is that they knew we were a trusted source and that they were going to get the right, accurate information from us. And so there is still that appetite for news that has this name that is going to be bringing true information to you. And when we make a mistake, which we do, we correct it publicly, which is a big thing that we do. That part of that media literacy is that people, if they're trying to evaluate a news site, they should look for how they correct their mistakes, because we correct our mistakes in public. So that there is still that appetite, but then what do you do when the appetite among some is for a truth they want to hear? Not
I think it's a really important point. I point that out all the time, that when a newspaper or a television station makes a mistake, we retract it, correct it, sometimes apologize for it. We don't get that out of the White House when things for the last couple of years have been proven to be false. But Guy, for the last month and a half, almost every day you get callers still who want to debate election fraud with you, and that's different from as we were just, I think all four of you have said now, that's a different thing, lying versus somebody's opinion. If you wanted President Trump to win the election or you wanted Joe Biden to win the election, that's apart from making allegations that really hold no water.
No, and I think this is the real danger for all of us, is that when the institution of media, however we care to define it today, begins to erode, is that two things have happened. We've got people believing that the coronavirus really is no worse than the flu. And we've got people believing that our election system, our democracy, our democratic process is sick. And when you don't believe in those like us that are trying to say, here are the facts, here's what we know, here's what's happened in court, and they don't want to believe it, that almost is an incurable problem now that we've seen that kind of erosion. And to Chastity's point, and it's about the blurred lines, we now have talking heads on prime time on all three cable channels that are posing as news people. But we also in newspapers have something we call analysis that ends up on the front page, which is really a form of an editorial that is blurring the lines as well. So there's this mix between true news and opinion and analysis that isn't helping us either. And we have a circular firing squad now on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, where they're critiquing one another.
It's exactly right. Gary, this is a point I was wanting to ask you about. In the old days, when I picked up the paper, I knew page 5 or page 6, wherever it happened to be. I knew I was looking at opinions. I knew I was looking at op-eds. Online now, it all gets jumbled up. I'm wondering if there's a better way for us, especially in the newspaper world, to distinguish between opinion and news coverage.
Yeah, I think this is an important area, and we've been trying very hard, I know, at the news, and I'm sure at the Free Press too, and other outlets, to make sure that when things go online, they're labeled opinion : or analysis : to differentiate them from other sources, and that's actually embedded in the headline. So when it gets shared on social media, an opinion isn't getting shared as if it's a statement of a fact. So that has been an effort. And I also think, that we ought to remember that I do think that the media has, in general, as we talk about it in these terms, that these 4 years have been good in the sense that I think there's a little more comfort now calling out an untruth as an untruth than there was maybe 4 years ago. And I think that's a positive development, and I think a welcome one. At the same time, I think we have to be careful not to overplay that hand. In other words, a lie has a connotation as something that is deliberately untrue, trying to paint a different picture. And if we call an untruth because someone misspoke a lie, then I think we sort of become the thought police. And I think people will react negatively to us trying to be the thought police. That's not our role.
No, I think we were slow to do that. I think you're exactly right. I've only got about 30 seconds left, but Chastity and Nancy, I wanted to let you both weigh in. Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic for the world of journalism moving ahead? Chastity, you first.
I'm worried because, when you use journalism as the straw man, as the nemesis, then that ends up, we end up seeing things like Charlie Hebdo, right? We end up seeing Jamal Khashoggi. We end up seeing 275 journalists around the world put in jail. I'm worried.
Yeah. And Nancy, you?
I see the chasm continuing to widen. I mean, you have an environment now where people can shop for their own facts, not just opinions, or interpretation or analysis, but their own facts. And we don't have the resources to do the type of reporting in communities that we used to do, where we covered school board meetings, business openings, and all that stuff that build this trust relationship so that people knew we were reliable. We told you the truth that there was a new sandwich shop opening, so you can believe us. We told you about what's happening in your school board, so you can believe us when we tell you this bigger stuff. And we just simply don't have the resources to do that type of reporting that was normal, I think, when all of us started in the profession. So I'm worried about that.
Yeah, me too. The four of you delivered exactly the kind of conversation I knew you would. Thanks so much for the conversation. Happy New Year to all of you, and we'll talk to you. Hopefully see you all again and soon in person.
Thanks.
We'll take a quick break. Back with more on Flashpoint right after this.